In the quiet city of Anchorage, Alaska, a tragic story began, a story that left the community in shock. Cynthia Hoffman, a sweet and trusting young woman, disappeared during what was supposed to be a fun day with friends. A few days later, her body was found near the Eklutna River, tied up with duct tape. Her life had been taken in a cruel way. Who could have done such a thing? And why? What started as a simple search for a missing person soon became something much darker. Investigators uncovered a strange and disturbing plot filled with lies, betrayal, and a chilling offer made by someone hiding behind a fake identity online. How did a group of young friends become part of such a terrible act? Why did Denali Bremer turn against someone who trusted her so deeply? As the truth slowly came out, more and more questions arose. Was it because of greed, pressure, or something even deeper? Join us as we explore this tragic story where trust was broken and a young life was lost. Welcome to the Crime Series. I'm glad to have you join us on another video. Kindly subscribe, like, and share. Let me know where you're watching from. Born in 2000, Cynthia, affectionately known as Cece to her friends and loved ones, grew up in a close-knit household. The Hoffman family was not wealthy, but they valued hard work, honesty, and loyalty. For Cynthia, those values shaped her character, making her a beloved daughter and friend. From a young age, Cynthia faced challenges that set her apart from her peers. Diagnosed with developmental delays, she functioned at a level younger than her actual age, a reality that sometimes led to social isolation and misunderstanding. Despite this, Cynthia possessed a radiant spirit and a heart full of compassion. Her father, Timothy Hoffman, described her as the kind of person who always wanted to help others. Cynthia attended Service High School in Anchorage, where she worked hard to overcome her learning difficulties. Teachers and classmates remember her as a diligent student who always tried her best, even when things didn't come easily. She never sought pity or special treatment. Instead, she approached life with a resilient optimism. Her graduation in 2018 was a proud moment for both Cynthia and her family, symbolizing her perseverance in the face of adversity. Socially, Cynthia gravitated toward a small circle of friends who accepted her for who she was. In a world that often judged her based on her limitations, these friends offered a safe space where she could be herself. Unlike Cynthia Hoffman's life, which was filled with simplicity and warmth, Denali Bremer's life took a darker turn as she entered her teenage years. Born and raised in Anchorage, Denali grew up in a turbulent environment marked by instability and troubled relationships. Her early years were overshadowed by a lack of consistent parental guidance, leading her to seek solace and validation in friendships and online communities. By the time she reached adolescence, Denali was known for her outgoing nature and a desire to fit in. She craved acceptance and often went to great lengths to maintain her social image. Her peers described her as someone who was always seeking attention and approval, traits that made her susceptible to negative influences. While she appeared confident and self-assured on the surface, those close to her sensed a deeper insecurity lurking beneath. Denali's frequent use of social media became a significant aspect of her life. She spent hours online, chatting with strangers, and forming virtual relationships. This digital realm offered her an escape from the realities of her life, allowing her to craft an image that was far removed from her true self. However, this also made her vulnerable to manipulation by individuals who preyed on her insecurities. One such individual was Darren Schillmiller, an online predator who posed as a wealthy and charming man named Tyler from Kansas. Schillmiller targeted Denali, exploiting her longing for validation and financial stability. He promised her a lavish lifestyle and unconditional love, convincing her that he was a millionaire who could change her life. To Denali, who was desperate for a way out of her struggles, this promise seemed like a dream come true. Darren Schillmiller, the enigmatic figure at the center of this dark saga, lived a life that starkly contrasted with the opulent persona he portrayed online. Residing in New Salisbury, Indiana, Schillmiller was far from the wealthy and charismatic Tyler he claimed to be. Instead, he was a young man with limited prospects, living in relative obscurity. Yet, despite his unassuming real-life existence, he wielded immense influence through the power of digital manipulation. Schillmiller's tactics were carefully calculated. Using fake photographs and crafting a convincing backstory, he established his online persona as a successful millionaire who could offer anyone a life of luxury. The allure of wealth and status attracted numerous individuals, but it was Denali Bramer who became his most susceptible target. Schillmiller preyed on her vulnerabilities, promising her not just material riches but also a sense of worth and belonging, things she desperately craved. Through their online interactions, Schillmiller exerted psychological control over Denali. He knew precisely how to exploit her insecurities, alternating between affection and manipulation to ensure her compliance. Over time, he escalated his demands, testing the limits of what she was willing to do for his approval. His ultimate proposal, a murder in exchange for $9 million, was a testament to the depths of his depravity and the extent of his hold over Denali. The proposition presented by Darren Schillmiller to Denali Bramer was more than just a test of her loyalty. It was a chilling descent into the realm of the unthinkable. Having already gained Denali's trust through a fabricated identity and false promises of wealth, Schillmiller upped the ante by introducing a scheme that was as horrifying as it was surreal. He proposed that Denali commit murder and document the act in exchange for $9 million, an offer that blurred the line between fantasy and reality. At first, the proposition seemed like a dark fantasy, a thought experiment meant to test the boundaries of Denali's loyalty. However, Schillmiller's persistence made it clear that he was serious. He instructed her on how to carry out the plan, emphasizing the need for photographic evidence as proof of the crime. The explicit nature of his instructions left no doubt about his intentions. He wanted a real victim and real proof. Denali's mind became a battleground between the remnants of her conscience and the overpowering influence of Schillmiller's promises. She began to rationalize the proposition, convincing herself that the reward justified the act. Once Denali Bramer accepted Darren Schillmiller's chilling proposition, she knew she could not act alone. Carrying out a murder was not something she could do by herself, and Schillmiller's demand for photographic evidence only complicated the situation further. She needed help by people who were desperate enough or easily manipulated, just as she had been. Denali began by reaching out to her close friend, Caden McIntosh, a 16-year-old who was grappling with his own personal issues. Caden, like Denali, was vulnerable and impressionable. He had faced his share of difficulties growing up, including struggles with identity and belonging. Denali painted the offer as a golden opportunity. $9 million split among them would solve all their problems. She framed it as a chance to escape their troubled lives, promising Caden a future of wealth and freedom. Caden's involvement was crucial to Denali's plan. She needed someone she could trust and who was willing to go along with her scheme. Despite any initial hesitation, Caden agreed, lured by the promise of money and perhaps by a misplaced sense of loyalty to Denali. He did not fully comprehend the gravity of what he was getting into, nor did he foresee the devastating consequences. In addition to Caden, Denali approached Caleb Leyland, a 19-year-old who had also struggled with personal and financial instability. Caleb was another vulnerable individual, and Denali exploited his circumstances to recruit him. She convinced him that this was a one-time act that would change their lives forever. Like Caden, Caleb was enticed by the idea of wealth and a way out of his difficult life. Together, the trio began to form a plan. They discussed the logistics of the murder, how they would lure Cynthia Hoffman, and how they would document the act to fulfill Schillmiller's demands. What had initially seemed like an abstract proposition was now becoming a concrete and horrifying reality. June 2, 2019, began like any other summer day in Anchorage, Alaska. Cynthia Hoffman had no reason to suspect that her life was about to take a tragic turn. Her friends, Denali Bramer, Caden McIntosh, and Caleb Leyland, invited her on what seemed like a harmless outing, a hike to Thunderbird Falls, a popular local spot known for its scenic beauty. To Cynthia, it was an opportunity to spend time with people she trusted, especially her close friend Denali. The group started off acting like everything was normal, chatting and laughing as they walked the trail.
As we go into the most intense part of this video, kindly like and subscribe to this channel. It gives me motivation to create more videos. If you love this video, And wish to see more? Kindly subscribe.
Cynthia, who always found joy in simple pleasures, was excited to be outdoors, surrounded by
Your
nature.
support keeps us
However,
creating.
beneath what seemed like a simple hiking trip, a dark plan was in motion. Denali, Caden, and Caleb didn't just bring hiking gear, they also brought a gun and duct tape, which they planned to use for the terrible crime. As they ventured deeper into the wooded trail, the atmosphere began to change. The group moved away from the main path, choosing a secluded area where they would not be easily spotted by other hikers. Denali and Caden, under the guise of wanting to explore a more private part of the trail, led Cynthia away from any potential witnesses. Once they reached a remote location, the trio revealed their true intentions. Cynthia, realizing something was wrong, her trusted friends were not acting like themselves. It was in this moment that they restrained her using duct tape, binding her hands and covering her mouth to prevent her from calling for help. What followed was a chilling and calculated act. Caden McIntosh pulled the trigger, shooting Cynthia in the back of the head. The senseless violence ended her life instantly. In the aftermath, the group discarded her body into the Eklutna River, hoping that the flowing water would carry away any evidence of their crime. As the trio made their way back from the trail, the reality of what they had done began to sink in. They attempted to maintain their composure, acting as though nothing unusual had happened. However, their plans to cover up the crime were far from perfect. They left behind crucial evidence, including the gun and traces of duct tape, which would later play a significant role in the investigation. In the hours following the murder, Denali Bremer followed through with another part of Schillmiller's twisted demands, sending him photographic evidence of the crime. These images intended to secure the promised $9 million. Despite the cold-blooded nature of the act, the promised reward never materialized. Schillmiller, who had orchestrated the entire scheme from afar, never had any intention of paying them. It had all been a lie. For Cynthia's family, the hours after her disappearance were filled with growing concern. When Cynthia failed to return home, her father, Timothy Hoffman, reported her missing. He knew something was wrong. His daughter was not the type to vanish without explanation. As hours turned into days, law enforcement launched a search. But they were not prepared for the grim discovery that lay ahead. Cynthia's body was eventually found near the Eklutna River, bound with duct tape and showing clear signs of foul play. The scene was gruesome, and it was immediately evident to investigators that this was no accidental death. Anchorage's law enforcement quickly mobilized, aware that the brutal nature of the crime would send shockwaves through the close-knit community. The initial investigation centered on identifying Cynthia's last known contacts. Interviews with her family revealed that she had gone on an outing with Denali Bremer and Caden McIntosh, two individuals who were known to be close friends of Cynthia. Given the circumstances, they became persons of interest almost immediately. As the investigation unfolded, detectives began piecing together a timeline of events. Surveillance footage from various locations in Anchorage helped establish the group's movements on the day of the murder. Witnesses recalled seeing the trio together, seemingly enjoying a typical day out. Denali and Caden were questioned by the police. At first, they acted like they didn't know anything and tried to seem innocent, claiming that Cynthia had wandered off during their outing and that they had no idea what had happened to her. However, their stories began to unravel under the pressure of interrogation. Detectives noticed inconsistencies in their accounts and gaps in the timeline they provided. A breakthrough came when Caden McIntosh, the younger of the two, cracked under pressure and admitted his involvement. His confession opened a floodgate of information that painted a disturbing picture of what had transpired. Caden revealed that the murder had been planned in advance, and that Denali Bremer had orchestrated the entire event. He confessed that he had shot Cynthia in the back of the head under Denali's orders, and that they had disposed of her body near the river. Following Caden's confession, authorities obtained search warrants for Denali's phone and digital devices. What they found shocked even the seasoned investigators. Messages, photos, and videos on Denali's phone provided damning evidence of premeditation. Most chilling of all were the communications between Denali and Darren Schillmiller. the man who had posed as a wealthy millionaire named Tyler and manipulated Denali into carrying out the murder in exchange for a promised financial reward. Digital forensics played a crucial role in the investigation. Detectives uncovered extensive conversations between Denali and Schillmiller that outlined the entire plot, including explicit instructions from Schillmiller on how to carry out the murder and document it for proof. The evidence revealed that Schillmiller, despite being thousands of miles away in Indiana, had orchestrated the crime through digital manipulation and coercion. With the evidence mounting against them, Denali Bramer and Caden McIntosh were formally charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and tampering with evidence. Caleb Leyland, another accomplice who had been recruited by Denali, was also arrested and charged with conspiracy and other related offenses. Detectives coordinated with law enforcement in Indiana to track down and apprehend Darren Schillmiller. When he was arrested, Schillmiller initially denied any involvement. However, confronted with the overwhelming digital evidence linking him to the crime, he eventually admitted to catfishing Denali and inciting the murder. His cold and detached demeanor during the interrogation underscored the calculated nature of his actions. The unraveling of this conspiracy shocked the local community and made national headlines. It was a story not just of a senseless murder, but also of the dark potential of online manipulation. The case highlighted the dangers of digital deception and the ease with which predators can exploit vulnerable individuals through the anonymity of the internet. As the investigation concluded, prosecutors prepared to bring charges against all involved. Denali Bramer faced multiple charges, including first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Caden McIntosh and Caleb Leyland were also charged with murder and conspiracy. Darren Schillmiller, the mastermind behind the plot, was charged with solicitation of murder and numerous other offenses related to his role in the crime. When the case went to trial, Denali admitted that Darren Schillmiller had tricked and pressured her, but she also admitted that she chose to go along with the plan. The courtroom became a place where people tried to understand how much Denali was responsible and how much she was influenced by Schillmiller's control. The defense lawyers talked about how online relationships can lead to dangerous situations. The defense team said that Denali was just another victim who was pushed into doing something terrible. They argued that Schillmiller had used her weaknesses and made her believe she had no choice. On the other side, the prosecutors said Denali knew what she was doing and had plenty of chances to stop. They showed text messages and videos as proof that Denali had planned everything and asked others to help her. The prosecutors made it clear that while Schillmiller played a big role, Denali was still responsible for her actions. The courtroom was filled with emotions. Cynthia's family sat through the trial, hearing every painful detail. Denali cried as she talked about what happened and said she was sorry. But the jury had to decide based on the facts, not just emotions. After months of investigations, arrests, and courtroom proceedings, the trial of those responsible for Cynthia Hoffman's murder finally reached its conclusion. The Anchorage community, still grappling with the shocking details of the case, watched closely as justice was sought for Cynthia and her grieving family. Denali Bramer, identified as the central figure in the conspiracy and the one who carried out the heinous act, faced the harshest sentence. During the trial, Denali's defense team attempted to argue that she had been manipulated by Darren Schillmiller, the man who had catfished her and orchestrated the crime from afar. They claimed that Denali's actions were driven by fear and coercion, painting her as another victim of Schillmiller's sinister scheme. However, the prosecution countered this narrative by presenting irrefutable evidence of Denali's willing participation in the crime. At her sentencing hearing, Denali Bramer expressed remorse for her actions, tearfully apologizing to Cynthia's family. She claimed that she had been blinded by the promise of money and manipulated into believing that carrying out the crime would solve her problems. Despite her plea for leniency, the judge handed down a sentence of 99 years in prison, emphasizing that Denali's actions were deliberate and devastating. Caden McIntosh, who had been directly involved in the act of murder, was also tried and convicted. During his trial, his defense team argued that he had been influenced by Denali and was too young and impressionable to fully understand the consequences of his actions. Nevertheless, the court found him guilty of second-degree murder and conspiracy. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison with the possibility of parole after serving a significant portion of his sentence. Caleb Leyland, who had played a lesser role in the conspiracy by helping with logistics and transportation, was charged with conspiracy to commit murder. Recognizing his comparatively minor role, the court sentenced him to 10 years in prison with the possibility of early release for good behavior. Meanwhile, Darren Schillmiller, the mastermind behind the entire plot, faced separate legal proceedings in Indiana. Extradited to Alaska to stand trial, Schillmiller was charged with solicitation of murder, pornography, and numerous other crimes related to his online manipulation of Denali and others. During his trial, the court heard disturbing details about how Schillmiller had exploited Denali's vulnerabilities for his own gratification. He was ultimately convicted and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentencing phase of the case provided some measure of closure for Cynthia's family, who had endured unimaginable pain throughout the ordeal. Timothy Hoffman, Cynthia's father, spoke during the sentencing hearings, describing the impact of his daughter's loss on their family. "We trusted her friends," he said, his voice breaking with emotion. "We never imagined that someone she trusted could do something so cruel. Cynthia was a kind soul, and she didn't deserve this."